Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Welcome back to ISKCON of Silicon Valley, or if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Our mission is to create here an oasis through which people from any culture can come and find a spiritual environment through which they can take up personal practice and improve themselves and thrive. We have a vision that this is our base from which we expand that facility to various parts of Silicon Valley. And one of the main ways that we've been doing that in the past is through the faculty of the internet. So we welcome everyone who's joined us online today from various places around the world. And today we're going to take some time to look at what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is yoga, and to look at ways in which we can actually employ the principles that he's mentioning, because by following the instructions that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone from any part of the world can actually get traction in improving their lives and feeling for themselves the kind of relief and happiness that Krishna promises in the Bhagavad Gita for those who do practice the tenets of yoga that he mentions. So I first offer my respectful obeisances thousands of times to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all the teachers who came before him, going back more than 37 generations, back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through an unbroken chain of teachers who have brought the same science of Krishna consciousness down from the time when Krishna originally spoke it, and it's been renewed many times, not the least of which is through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared about 500 years ago in West Bengal. And we, as followers of our sampradaya and the chain of teachers, are especially in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore we're called Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Vaishnava means one who worships Krishna or Vishnu, and we have a very specific way of doing that, and practices that come down through our tradition, that come down from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who the scriptures point to as the most recent avatar of Krishna himself in this world. And because we're so closely connected to him through time even, what to speak of his descendants who have brought his teachings to light, and the most recent of which was His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, we feel very fortunate. I also offer my humble respects and obeisances to all of you and all the listeners online, because you are all Vaishnavas and therefore the most worshipable within the three worlds. Hare Krishna. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says something profound. It's a very simple statement about yoga that he makes in text number 248. And this is what he says. Yogasta kuru karmani sangam taktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samadvam yoga uchite. Now I'm predicting that you're going to be very interested in hearing what the word-for-word meanings are in this verse. Am I correct about that? Okay. Therefore, I'll say them and you can repeat them in the Sanskrit and the English, and then you'll have a sense for what Krishna is saying in the verse. Yogastha, equipoised. And then we'll have our... let's see if you can look up the word equipoise so we get a good idea of what we're talking about. Kuru, perform. Karmani, your duties. So even in the first line and the first three words, I think there's relatable meaning here. That he's saying, when you're doing your work, even these two words, kuru karmani, that's doing your duties. We can relate to the fact that we have duties that we have to do on a daily basis. Do you find that yourselves? Yeah, sometimes I notice that I'm moving about quite vigorously in my, even starting early in the morning, and one thing after another, there are duties to perform. I can't neglect them, or if I do, it will be at my peril. And I think it's something that everybody can relate to, the fact that you have to perform certain duties in your life. Can you think of some things that you have to do every day that come into the category of duty? Yeah, well, I'm looking for specifics, actually. Yes? You have to cook. Who said cook? Oh, Terkula. Yeah, definitely. Keep up the good work, would you? Yep, cook a lot, too. What else? Cleaning, yes. Cooking and cleaning are prerequisites for human life, actually, because this is mentioned even in the ancient scriptures of India, that one must cook in order to survive. Therefore, there's a consideration, even as you do cook, there's a kind of karma that's incurred because, where did you get the food? And even while you're cooking, you're lighting fire, you're killing living entities and so forth. But it's something you have to do anyway in order to survive. And humans have to stay clean. What else do you have to do every day? Yes? What is she saying? Serving Krishna. That's a duty that you have to do every day. Be very specific also if you can. Yes? What? Homework. Yes. If you're in school, you have duties to perform. One of the students was running out the door yesterday and said, "Where are you going in such a hurry?" And she said, "I have homework to do." We examined her textbook and saw that we verified that that's what she was actually doing. Yeah, so there are many duties. If you add them all up, there are things to do. So yogastha kuru karmani, when you're doing your duties, and Krishna's saying in the very beginning, be equipoised. And now we're going to hear what equipoised means.
So equipoised as a noun means balance of forces or interests.
Balance of forces or interests.
And as a verb means balance or counterbalance something.
Balance or counterbalance.
And the origin is middle 17th of century from equi, which means equal, and plus the noun poise. And the noun poise means, as a verb, as a noun means graceful and elegant bearing in a person, and as a verb means be or cause to be balanced or suspended.
Yeah.
So equally balanced.
Okay, so yoga stha, and this word stha in Sanskrit really means to have a standing, to be able to be balanced, to have 2 feet on the ground. So yoga stha kuru karmani. So as you're doing your duties, how will you keep both feet on the ground? How will you be balanced? How you will stay even-minded? And then the next line goes like this. Go to the word for word, please. Sangam, attachment. Tyaktva, giving up. Dhananjaya. So now in the next line, we're hearing Krishna reveal a little more of what yoga means. Sangam tyaktva. So sangam means that you have an intimate connection with something. A sangha, because there's a way in which a sangha means, anga means something that's part of you. For instance, this arm is an anga of my body, and I'm very much attached to it. It's connected to me. And tyaktva means to give something up. So now, it doesn't necessarily mean to give up your duties, because Krishna's saying you're doing your duties. As you do your duties, yogastha kuru karmani, you're doing them, but sangam tyaktva, Dhananjaya, and he's calling Arjuna Dhananjaya. It's an affectionate term he has for him because he had helped to do the fundraising for the Rajasuya sacrifice. So now, while you're doing your duty, there's a kind of internal adjustment that you're making as you're doing it. And that is that you're giving up attachment. And let's hear what kind of attachments you'd be giving up, if you can bear to go further, hearing that we have to give something up. Should I keep going? Or should we just leave it at that? Keep going. Okay, you're very brave. Okay, so the next lines, Krishna says, Siddhi Asiddho. In success and failure, Sama. Equipoised. Bhutva. Becoming. So now, again, he uses this word sama, which means to be equal, the same, equipoised, really, you don't change. And what don't you change in? Siddhi asiddho. So siddhi means that you did it right, or it turned out the way you thought it was, turned out perfectly. Asiddho means that, asiddhyo means that it didn't. So possibility when you're doing your work that it turns out well, or maybe it didn't go the way you thought. It could go either way, right? Yep. So now, do you stay the same, no matter which result you got? And of course, this doesn't mean that you neglect your duty and it doesn't come out well and then you say, well, it doesn't matter. In fact, one of the first ways in which Srila Prabhupada corrected his disciples, when they used to claim sometimes, when they neglected their duty, or they were whimsical about it, or inattentive, and then they claimed afterwards, well, it doesn't matter, it's Krishna's mercy. And Prabhupada would say, actually, no, it's your foolishness. And that goes to somebody inattentively put salt in the charnamrita instead of sugar. And then after Prabhupada tasted it and was shocked by it and asked who did it, the person claimed, it's Krishna's mercy, that the mistake was made. But he corrected this devotee and said, no, actually, you're supposed to do your duty the best you can. It's not that you're detached from doing your duty. And this is something that Krishna says elsewhere, that you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but don't be attached to the fruits. And also don't be attached to not doing your duty. So you're supposed to do it the best you can, and then if it comes out siddhi, perfect, or asiddhyo, it doesn't come out the way you expected, then you remain the same. You don't become disturbed. Now let's see the last line. Samadvam, equanimity, yoga, uchite is called. So samadvam yoga uchite. So this quality of doing work, samadvam yoga uchite, is called yoga. So the translation is like this. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. So this is a principle that we find throughout the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about being sama, or equal in all kinds of circumstances. For instance, he says that someone should remain equal when the environment changes. In the earlier verse in the second chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Matra sparshasta kauntaya shitoshna sukhadukada agama paino nityas tamstatikshashva bharata. And this means that no matter what the external environment brings to you, and it could be quite severe or changing, that you remain the same. And you are titiksha, you're tolerant of the external circumstances. And Krishna stresses this in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in the chapter on devotional service, that this principle always applies in our lives. And now I'm going to read the purport. Krishna tells Arjuna that he should act in yoga. And what is that yoga? Yoga means to concentrate the mind upon the Supreme by controlling the ever-disturbing senses. And who is the Supreme? The Supreme is the Lord. And because he himself is telling Arjuna to fight, Arjuna has nothing to do with the results of the fight. Gain or victory are Krishna's concern. Arjuna is simply advised to act according to the dictation of Krishna. The following of Krishna's dictation is real yoga, and this is practiced in the process called Krishna consciousness. By Krishna consciousness only can one give up the sense of proprietorship. One has to become the servant of Krishna, or the servant of Krishna. That is the right way to discharge duty in Krishna consciousness, which alone can help one to act in yoga. Arjuna is a Kshatriya, and as such, he is participating in the Varnashrama Dharma institution. It is said in the Vishnu Purana that in the Varnashrama Dharma, the whole aim is to satisfy Vishnu. No one should satisfy himself, as is the rule in this material world, but one should satisfy Krishna. So unless one satisfies Krishna, one cannot correctly observe the principles of Varnashrama Dharma. Indirectly, Arjuna was advised to act as Krishna told him. This is helpful in that we have to take some superior dictation. And either the dictation comes from our senses and mind, which when they are conditioned, give us the kind of dictation that gets us in more and more trouble. Or we can take dictation from Krishna, especially from the Bhagavad Gita, or those who are following the Bhagavad Gita. And when we do that, then we're not bound to the result of our activity because we're acting on behalf of Krishna and by his instruction. And this is the principle of following higher authority, through which we're not responsible for the result. We're doing the best we can to follow the authority, and therefore it's not the result that comes from our own endeavor or concoction. It's because of our engagement in following the authority that we get the result. And this is the process that Krishna recommends also in the Bhagavad Gita, that one should perform Buddhi Yoga, or that one should consult the higher authority. In this case, he's talking about, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, that one can take direction from the Bhagavad Gita and follow the tenets that Krishna is mentioning. And when one's intelligence and mind are purified, one also can take instruction from within, because the intelligence becomes connected to Krishna, and one's listening carefully and taking instruction from Krishna from within. In the Gita, Krishna says in the 10th chapter, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. That if you're sincerely trying to serve me, then I'll give the intelligence by which you can come to me. So one can understand how one's becoming advanced in Krishna consciousness by this principle of sama, or being equipoised amidst the changing events in one's life and the different kinds of results that one gets from the work that one's doing, and remaining steady in doing one's service to Krishna, even as one's performing worldly duties, and even as one's getting mixed results in one's life, and the circumstances and environment of one's life is changing, one remains the same. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Chitraketu Maharaj, actually Lord Shiva mentions that Narayanat parak sarve na kutaschana pibhyati swarga pavarga narakeshu api tulyarta darshana. This means that a devotee, because he or she is fixed on doing service for Krishna, is not concerned whether he or she lives in heaven or in hell. Api tulyarta darshana, either place, as long as one is connected with his or her service, the devotee feels satisfied. Because after all, we can't always dictate where we're going to be in the material world or what the circumstances are going to be. But we can utilize our independence to decide to serve Krishna in whatever circumstances we're in life. And I would propose that this is the main asset that we actually have in our life. And that is a decision of where to give our attention and where to direct our work and to whom to give the results of our work. And if we utilize that, we'll find very quickly that our life becomes aligned with Krishna. Just by giving ourselves to Krishna to the best that we can right now, then we'll feel satisfaction almost immediately. So in the Gita, Krishna says in the 9th chapter, Yat karoshi yat ashnashi yat johosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kontiyat tat kurushva mararpanam. That whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, do it as an offering to me. And he also mentions in the chapter of Bhagavad Gita, number 3, called Karma Yoga, that if you work as a sacrifice for Krishna, that is, dedicate your work to Krishna, give the fruits of the work to Krishna, then the work actually becomes a means for becoming liberated from the material world, and it also connects you to Krishna, through which everything becomes abundant in your life because you're performing yajna through your work. So these are very practical principles that anyone can apply in their life. Number 1 is to read Bhagavad Gita and understand Krishna's intention, that he's offering to us an opportunity to be connected with him at all times. Some of the ways in which we can direct our attention and our intention in life is to work for him. And that includes whatever work we're doing now, dedicate at least some of the fruit of the work to him. And we can also be equipoised in our work by considering the fact, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that the outside world is always changing, but I'm not my physical or mental body. Those are always subject to change, and they're always in flux. But I, as a spirit soul, as a part and parcel of Krishna, am not affected ultimately by those external circumstances, even at the time of death. And Krishna emphasizes this in the verse, Dehinos minyata dehe komaranyavaram jara tatta deham para tara praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. And that is that we may be changing from boyhood to youth to old age, and then we may leave this body, we will leave at a certain point, but a person who's cultivated this idea of sama, I'm not my body, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, will not be disturbed even at that final change called death. He'll remain dhira, dhiras tatra namuyati, and not be bewildered by that change. And now we'll just take a few reflections. Anything that you heard so far that's stuck in your mind, or if you have a question, you can ask now. Hopefully the yellow mic has some juice in it. It has. It's been revived.
When we offer food to Krishna, is there a process that we have to follow? Like, do we have to keep the food? What's the process that you should follow when you give thanks?
The first process Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita is where he says, Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prayachiti taram bhakti paritamashhnami pariyatatmanaha. That whatever you offer to me, he says, or rather he says, if you offer me a leaf of flower, fruit, or water, it means it can be even a simple thing. If you offer it with devotion, you're really thinking Krishna's a person and I'm offering it to him, then he says, I'll accept it. Ashnami paritatmanaha. I'll take it, I'll taste it. I eat that thing. So the first rule is that it should be with devotion. Then some of the other things are that consider in a very personal way, how do you offer something to a dignified person? When you're preparing food for somebody, you go out of your way to make sure that it's clean, that you offer it to them respectfully, and maybe you give them a nice plate and a glass of water to go with it. So these are some of the considerations we give to offering something to a person in this world that we like or we'd like to impress. So when we offer to Krishna, we should also go out of our way to make it a nice presentation as much as possible. As we used to say in the old days, you offer to Krishna with love and devotion, rather than lust and commotion. So that's a consideration. And it also helps, as per Krishna's instructions and many instructions in the Shastra, this is an inside secret, but if you put a tulsi leaf on the food before you offer it, and then you offer it, then it becomes irresistible to Krishna. So it's highly recommended that you put tulsi. There are more detailed instructions that come through the process of deity worship, where these are some prayers that you can say, and you should ring a bell when you offer and things like that. But the main principles are the ones that I said. The other things can be learned as you go along. And they're not to also interfere ultimately with the consideration that you're putting into it and the devotion. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
For this verse, I have a question, and many times I think I forget the answer maybe. But while performing our duty, we have to be sometimes little strong. Sometimes we have to be acting in a way by which you tend to become like, you become one has to, as a father, let's say, giving a very specific example. Yeah, one needs to become very strong and talking and behaving as if things don't happen in that way. So although it's not attachment, or it's little attachment, although because we're still learning on that path, how to see these things differently, one, and two, like how
one
to
at
be,
a time.
how to be a devotee.
One question at a time, please, because I
So
can't.
only one question is how
Okay.
to be devotee at home also, because many times I feel like becoming demon at home and devotee in the temple.
Yes, that's a good point. Excellent point. Fortunately, we have the example of Arjuna, and the context of the Bhagavad Gita then becomes a standard through which we can see how we could possibly implement these principles at home as well, because after all, Krishna's instructing Arjuna on a battlefield. And was Arjuna a little strong when he went into battle? Or did he pull back? Arjuna was strong. When he went into battle, he performed his duty of fighting, and in the beginning he pulled back. But then when he thought that if I perform this duty, then I'm not going to get the result that I want. In fact, he said, I'm noticing that I'm doing all my worldly duties the way I think I should do it, but I'm getting the opposite result. And Prabhupada comments to this statement that this is what always happens in the material world. Not sometimes, but always. And then when Arjuna became clear about what his real duty was, that was the understanding that I'm going to fight the war for Krishna. And then, as he was performing his duty of fighting as a Kshatriya, he was in the Varnashram, he was a Kshatriya warrior, so nobody likes a non-violent policeman. If you call a policeman and say somebody's attacking me, and say that, well, it's okay, because I don't want to hurt anybody. A Kshatriya, Shat means to hurt, for the sake of defense, and so forth. And so, when somebody's giving instruction, and that it's their duty to teach, if somebody's about to step off a roof because they're backing up, you have to shout, hey, hey, watch it. It's like, stop yelling at me. Don't be so pointed. It's like, this saved you from coming off the roof. You have to do your duty appropriately. But in the context of home, Krishna says that even as to Arjuna, even as you fight the war, then you think of me at the same time. And as far as fatherly duties go, the Bhagavatam says that the ultimate goal of somebody who's a father or any kind of teacher is to bring somebody to Krishna consciousness. So you have to be aware of the ways in which to instruct people so that the children, so that they can come to that point. And sometimes it requires some pointed directions in order that they understand and are able to save themselves ultimately by coming to Krishna. So there's no dichotomy. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmaradhyujacha mayarpita manobuddhir mami vaishyasya samshayaha. Krishna tells Arjuna, therefore, even as you're fighting, or even as you're doing your whatever worldly duty you have, you should think of me, do the work for me, and remember me as you're doing it, as the ultimate goal of your work. So Radhika Raman Prabhu was just here. He gave a seminar over the weekend, and he grew up in Krishna consciousness, and his parents took pains at home to make sure that while he was doing his studying, that he was connecting to the Bhagavatam, that he was chanting Hare Krishna and so forth. And then he's grown up in such a way that he's able to connect his career to Krishna consciousness and continue his practice in such a way that he can teach others in various places around the world. Does that help? Bali?
So I like the point about the equipoised, because if you remember the previous verse and the post verse, what Krishna is pointing out is the next one he is mentioning in 49, especially that you do your work but try to avoid the sinful actions. So that means that the sinful actions are those things which will distract us, which will definitely take out from our balancing life. So, and in the previous verse he mentioned about karma nivadikaresha, means you do not need to be attached to any fruits of the results, rather than you offer it to me. So one way he's saying success and failure, and then the point which I like very much, which Shraddha Mataji also brought from the dictionary, the equipoised, that really stuck into my mind.
Thank you. Yes, karman yevidikaraste mapalishu kadachana makarma palahetubur nate karma swakarmani means that do your work but be unattached to the fruits, and also don't be attached to not doing your duty. Do your duty, but then don't consider that you're the cause of the result, and don't be attached to the ultimate result, because then you have to take the reaction of whatever happens. And the problem is that there's a complicated labyrinth of sinful reactions that we get involved in the material world, and the way that we become free from that is to dedicate our work to Krishna and follow his direction. And when we do that, then we're not liable. And that's why Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityaja, just surrender to me and dedicate your life to me. And when you do that, he said, I'll deal with all the reactions to your work. Therefore, one should become a devotee of Krishna. And this is Krishna's instruction in the Gita as well. Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mami vaishyasi yukvaivam atmana parayanaha. Just always think of me. And if you make this practical in your home or your work or anywhere else you are, is make sure that there's a way in which you're connected to Krishna and you're able to think of him. And dedicate your activities to him, become his devotee. You can bow down to him, you offer prayers, and follow the basic tenets of bhakti. And in that way, he says, your life will become perfect. Yes?
Maharaj, I was thinking that a couple of years ago you had asked us to do an exercise of standing on one foot and closing the eyes and trying to balance ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea of that exercise was that if we don't have a vision, then it's very difficult to be balanced or equipoised. So I was just thinking that if our vision is that we are doing everything for Krishna, then that balance is easier to obtain.
Yes. And Prabhupada comments on this in the Gita where he says that disturbance of the mind is due to the lack of an ultimate goal in life. And if one knows that the ultimate goal in life is Krishna and is focused on that, then whatever kinds of changes come up in one's life, one can tolerate, because you know that the ultimate goal of life is purification and becoming more dedicated and connected to Krishna. I'll just mention a couple more points, and that is that we have a material body and we have a psychological body as well. There are two physical bodies that we carry with us wherever we go, and by that I mean in this life we're inextricably connected to the physical body. We very much, well, I speak for myself, I very much identify with the body, that I think that, I'm a man. Someone else might think I'm a woman, someone else might think I'm a cat, someone else might think I'm a dog. This is a natural kind of misidentification with the physical body. And beyond the physical body, we also have a psychological body, which is made up of various subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego. And together, these form what is called the chitta, or the composite of our consciousness. Normally, that chitta is considered to be and described in Yoga Sutras and elsewhere to be like a clean mirror. A very clean and bright mirror, not a speck of dust on it. It's simply a very perfect reflective surface. However, in my interaction with the world, that mirror becomes darkened, and it also becomes opaque. It doesn't reflect properly anymore because it becomes dirty. And this comes about because I'm absorbing from my environment many different impressions that come through my senses. These are called vrittis. And they are something like if you walk through wet cement a bunch of times back and forth, and you leave, instead of a nice smooth surface on the cement, you walk through and you leave all kinds of footprints if you walk back and forth, and pretty soon it's a very rough surface with lots of different kinds of impressions. So there's a way in which our psychological body, life after life, takes on the various impressions that we take in through our senses, and it leaves a very confusing collection of impressions that all together leave that reflective surface of the chitta unclear. And then, when I'm moving about the world, the choices I make are based on the kinds of ways in which I've become conditioned by the various modes of material nature. And although I think I'm making independent choices, it's based on my previous associations and the way that I've become conditioned. Therefore, the principle of yoga first is to clarify the mind. And as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu put it in his famous verses, which describe the process of bhakti yoga concisely but perfectly, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. He said, the first purpose of yoga is to clean the mirror of the mind. That surface has to become clean again so that we can actually see ourselves and we can be in alignment with our higher purpose, which is devotion to Krishna. So how does one do that? Lord Chaitanya said, if you perform the process of bhakti yoga by repeating the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the most propagated of all mantras through our sampradaya is this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra that you'll find in the Kali Santarana Upanishad. It appears there as a kind of reference, like you'd look up on, what's that place? Not Wikipedia, the place that gives references, recommendations? No, recommendations, if you're looking for, what? Yelp. Yeah, it's like Yelp. It says, gives it the 5-star rating. This is Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. This Chandogya Upanishad, the Kali Santaran Upanishad says, Kali Nashana Nashanam, that in the age of Kali, this mantra is for you. And 5 stars. Everybody agrees. All the Shastras weigh in, they put their little mark, they say, yes, this is the mantra that you need. And the mantra itself is eternal. In fact, you'll find that sound in the Vedas is given the primary spot for our advancement or our degradation. Anavriti Shabdat, says the Vedanta Sutra, which means that by sound you can become uncovered, you can free yourself. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying the same thing, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, that you can free your mind and clean it again, the surface of your mind, through the process of sound vibration. And the different kinds of sounds that I'm subjected to in my life, or I subject myself to, very likely, right? I can subject my own self to different kinds of sound. And sound is like an archaeologist looks for fossils in the ground to give information of civilizations past and find out what happened many, many years ago. You get, in an archaeological dig, you may come up with a beautiful fossil and say, oh, there used to be an ocean here because I just found a fossil of a seashell. That used to happen. My parents had some property up in Mendocino, and as kids, it was way far from the ocean, but we'd start digging there and we'd find all these fossils under the ground that indicated that some thousands of years ago the ocean was right there. So in a similar way, there are sound fossils also. In fact, words are indicative of culture, and they can tell you a lot. Linguists study what kinds of cultures there were in the world by looking at the various languages. When I studied English, they made us learn Middle English and Old English. And Middle English you can kind of understand, like Shakespearean English, Middle English. But when you go back into Old English and you try to understand it, it's not comprehensible to the modern ear. You'd have to learn a new language. But it's still English, but it's come from a different culture, different time. And there are different words, phrases, and so forth that you can dig up. Prabhupada said in one conversation that when you're looking at the history of language, said, when was the first time, can you trace it out, when someone said mother? When was that first utterance? Words go back and back and back, and you can trace ancient cultures. In fact, when the British came to India and they were looking for ways to disparage the culture there, because people generally, especially when they get into sectarian groups, like to proclaim that we're the best. And so when they see other cultures that are excelling in something, they like to find out ways to disparage them and show that they're not very good, actually. So that was one of the intentions of the British in India. However, they were shocked when one of the scholars who came to India found out that there was a Sanskrit language that was prominent there, and then reported to the world that this way more advanced than Latin. And people then started to try to disparage the scholar himself and his research findings, but they stand by themselves because it's actually true. The Sanskrit language is indicative of a very advanced culture. So I'm making the point that from sound and from language, you can learn things from civilizations past. You can get a fossil record of what happened and so forth, and a word can bring you import in many different ways. And then the Bhagavatam says there's another kind of sound. It has, in the same context, ways of bringing you information, but there are some forms of language that actually bring you information directly from the spiritual world. So the Srimad Bhagavatam says, Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abhadyavatyapi namanyanantasya yashon kitaniyat shrinvanti gayanti grunanti sadhava. And that's when you hear the transcendental sounds of the mantras that come from Srimad Bhagavatam, and from the other transcendental literatures, you're getting a sound record that's coming from a different creation, from beyond the material world. And by taking that sound vibration into your life, you can transform yourself, rise above the imperfections of the mind, rise above all the anxieties of the world caused by interaction with the senses and their objects for sense gratification, and come to the position of Brahma Bhuta, or the spiritual platform. And how would one do this? Find a system of connecting yourself on a regular daily basis, means at least once a day, to transcendental sound. And then Krishna says, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuya yakalpate. If you do it regularly and consistently over time, then you'll rise above the material modes of nature, which are like ropes that bind us to various complicated situations in life that have their reactions and implications. And you'll come to the position of being a free soul once again on the Brahma Bhuta platform, or the spiritual platform, where you'll experience a great relief from the oppression of the senses and the various kinds of complications of life. You'll also feel compassion for all living beings. And this is the result of taking transcendental sound in one's life. And this is the means by which one can actually develop a true sense of samatvam, or equalness, even as the world's changing around us, and even as there are good and bad things that come to us. For instance, sometimes people praise you. Has that ever happened? And sometimes people blame you. Has that ever happened? Radhanath Maharaj told me that he found a verse that said that if you take credit for something you didn't do, then the karma for that is later on you have to get blamed for something you didn't do. And so it's a person who's sama has actually risen to the spiritual platform is equal whether he or she loses. For instance, to lose money. Who likes to lose money? Raise your hand. Said no one ever. And okay, thank you. See us after class. We'll assist you. Just kidding. Then, but who likes to get money? Like to get money. But Krishna says whether you get or whether you lose, of course, again, it doesn't include being whimsical. But if you're doing your regular duty, everything according to doing the best you can, and you lose or gain, the person who's in yoga remains equal. Or if such a person gets praise or blame, it remains equal. Because he's seeing that I'm not the material body, I'm actually the spirit soul, I'm only passing through in this one lifetime. I'm compartmentalized into a tiny little human body, which is like a vehicle, and my main duty in life is to come to the spiritual platform, and the main means to do that is to repeat the names of God. And if you do that in the process, two processes, one is called japa, which means to take time every day to pray to God through the repetition of his names. And the best mantra is the one called the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is written in a vocative form. It's a prayerful form where you're saying, "O my Lord, O energy of the Lord, please engage me in your service." And you can add your own emphasis from your heart to call out to Krishna when you're chanting the mantra. And there's no rule that says you can't put your whole heart and energy into this. No one can really stop you. You can actually lean into this as hard as you like. And if you're embarrassed by other people seeing you do this, then chant in a quiet, solitary place and really open your heart to Krishna and see what happens. Because if you do this, if you take this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra as your solemn goal in life and as a regular daily practice through which you commune with the Supreme Personality of Godhead through chanting, and you put your heart and soul into it, and you chant as heartily as you can with your full attention and with your heart, crying out to Krishna. You can even let him know your problems and say, you know, I can't take this anymore. Has anybody ever felt like that? Oh, good. I feel like that a lot. Yeah, just can't take it anymore. There's only one place you can really go where you can really be helped. Because a lot of people, you go to them and tell them, I can't take this anymore. And they say, yeah, I can't either. See you later. And but if you tell Krishna, he'll actually respond. And this is where a relationship develops. If you lean into the Hare Krishna mantra and pray to Krishna. And that's a regular daily function for those who practice bhakti yoga. Create a sacred space, both in your outside environment and also in your mind and heart. Create a space for the chanting in your mind, that this is my priority in life, and do it regularly, and do it as much as you can with your heart, and you'll see the result. And the second is to have kirtan, or chant in association with those whose main purpose in life is to develop pure love for God. And if you do that in a assembly of people who are committed like that, then you'll get a powerful result from chanting the names of God. So those are two functions of, or processes of bhakti yoga that are especially powerful. And then, as a basis, it's important to perform karma yoga. That means sacrifice the fruits of your work to Krishna. Don't just try to squirrel it all away and save it. There's squirrels that live around our house. They're getting active right now because I think they sense the autumn coming on. Have you noticed? I noticed because they start saving stuff. They're digging up all kinds of stuff in the garden, and they hide nuts. And they hide it in the funniest places sometimes, like in plain sight. It's like, I can see that, you know. And it's so easily washed away by the rain, or somebody else who comes along and takes it. And all the kinds of things that I try to squirrel away in this lifetime, these are easily taken away from one direction or another, or one living entity or another. So although it's okay for grihastas to squirrel something away for emergencies and take care of yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. But you should, in a dedicated way, give systematically some of the fruits of your labor to Krishna. Because then you'll start to perform yajna through your work. This is called karma yoga. These things are important for purification of one's existence. And if you do that plus chant Hare Krishna, there are a few other things, but those are the basic things that will be effective in the process. Okay, some reflections?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
When Krishna says, perform your duty without any attachment, is that spiritual or material? Because sometimes I feel like if I see my spiritual practice as a duty, it just stays as a duty and it doesn't transform into love, like something I'm doing out of love for Krishna. I'm just doing it because it's my duty to do it.
Well, in the beginning, we may have to do some of the activities we do in Krishna consciousness out of duty, and then gradually we'll develop more of a spontaneous attraction to them. For instance, Prabhupada points out in the Nectar of Devotion that in the beginning, when devotees perform bhakti yoga, and they get up early in the morning to perform Mangalartik and dress the deities and so forth, at first it may seem like a duty, and sometimes it seems arduous. The senses may not be accustomed to waking up early, and they may complain and say, well, you know, do we have to do this? But after doing it for some time, one starts to develop a natural attraction to it because it's real, and the connection with Krishna is real, and then there's a way in which there's a sustained enthusiasm that comes from actually wanting to do it for Krishna. So Narada Muni says, from the material point of view, on that side of the ledger, he says you can do just what you have to do in the material world and be kind of nonchalant about your duty. Not nonchalant, but I would say methodical but dispassionate. do what you have to do to maintain your material duties. These are called Vyavaharika duties. This is mentioned, Radhika Raman Prabhu mentioned in his class, it comes up in the teachings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. You have your Vyavaharika, the things that you have to do to pay your rent and your telephone and your insurance, and you make a long list. So those have to be covered in order for you to live a normal life, right? So you do those, but be methodical and dispassionate. But when it comes to your duties in Krishna consciousness, you can be a little passionate. Not in the sense that you're frenetic, but that you really put your heart into them. Because the result there will be unlimited when you do that. And in the beginning, if you don't have taste when you do it, then you have to do it out of duty. But as you continue to do it out of duty because of proximity to Krishna, because he's so nice, he everything about him is beautiful, then you'll start to notice that and you'll think, hey, this is a much better way of life. I'm actually happy doing this. And then you feel well situated. And the added attraction to that is, at the same time, you also, although you're doing your duty in your life for your Vyavaharika, you'll start to feel that, I'm doing it out of duty, but I'm not really that into it. And that's an added attraction that comes from practicing bhakti, because one naturally becomes detached from all things that aren't directly related to Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, used to do his daily bodily functions and duties as he moved around the world just out of rote, because his mind was so absorbed in his service and bhakti and serving Krishna that he didn't really consider the other things. They just went on. His mind was fixed on Krishna. Does that help? There's a lot we do have to do just to maintain ourselves. And we notice once a year when we go to Govardhan, it's a kind of a marathon of hearing and chanting. And normally we're able to squeeze out 5 hours of hearing the Bhagavatam each day. And I noticed, we've been doing it, this will be becoming the 18th year if we make it back there this year. And then I noticed, though, 5 hours, I mean, we have 24. What happened to the other 19? I was thinking, why not 20 hours a day? But there's so many things you have to do just to get ready and actually sit down and hear for that many hours in a day, just to keep yourself alive. And of course, there are other spiritual duties to do as well. And we do take prasadam, and then you do take a little rest and things like that. So you have to find a way in your life to balance things, so you're doing your regular duty, you do your Krishna conscious duty, but put more of your heart into your Krishna conscious duties, because they'll take you back to Godhead and you will develop a taste for them. Thank you for the question. And now we're going to try the kirtan aspect of bhakti yoga by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra together. And you can really think about the names of Krishna as you're chanting, and the fact that this is a prayer to Krishna, asking for his mercy. So I want you, while we're doing this kirtan, if you will, to consider that we're all quite helpless in this world. We're kind of left off here. We're not sure exactly where we came from, and we're not exactly sure where we're going, and we're not even exactly sure when we're going there. And in the meantime, we're hanging in the balance. Our lives are hanging in the balance, just like a little drop of water on a lotus leaf, which can slip off at any moment. And if you consider that very carefully, instead of thinking, I'm not saying you're thinking this is something like I would think, that I'm fine and I'm going to live forever, then your feeling as you're chanting may not be as impassioned. But if you're considering that I'm helpless and I need Krishna's assistance right away, then we may call out with a little bit more earnest and sincere prayer. Does that make sense? Okay. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared 500 years ago. He was Krishna himself, but he came in the mood of his devotee, Srimati Radharani, and that's a great boon for us, because as Srimati Radharani, she's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his mood is very charitable. In Vrindavan, Krishna's mood is called Madhurya, or the mood of all the devotees there is sweetness. But in Navadvip, which is said to be non-different from Vrindavan, the mood is Audharya. It's that cup of sweetness, but it's overflowing and it's going out to everybody. And it's very charitable. It means to give it to the whole world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates had the intention that everyone in the world, no matter where they were from, what culture, where they started from in life, they would get an opportunity to take to the process of the chanting of Hare Krishna, and they could taste the ultimate nectar of life. So one of the missions of ISKCON of Silicon Valley is that we give the opportunity to everybody, at least in our immediate area, which means all over the Bay Area, to hear about Krishna through the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, to take literatures into their home, and they also get to hear the chanting of Hare Krishna. To that end, we hold open classes here on a regular basis every Wednesday night. We have a program here at 6 p.m. And then we also have a program at 7:30 p.m. Actually, now it starts at 6 a.m. on Saturday, because we have a japa circle here that anybody can come and join. If you want to start your chanting of japa, it's a good way to get it started. We sit in a circle here, and on Saturday mornings we all chant together. And there's a lot of powerful energy in that circle. So devotees have the experience that when they go away from that, they have more impetus when they go home to fight against the power of the senses, which say, well, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow. And then we also have, obviously, here Sunday. And there are programs around the Bay Area in various places, and there are lots of ways that you can join online to hear about Krishna consciousness. So our mission is to make sure that we keep expanding in the Bay Area to give facility to as many people as possible. And to that end, devotees go door to door. And we've covered tens of thousands of doors here in the Bay Area over the last 20 years. We've knocked on doors of apartments, houses, going shop to shop and so forth. And literally, we've distributed millions of pieces of literature to the people of the Bay Area. And we're finding more and more that people here are ready for Krishna consciousness. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu deputed everyone who has a little desire in their heart. If you have a small flame of desire in your heart where you think, well, let me help to spread the Krishna consciousness movement, then he's got a job for you. And so do we here at ISV. So if you have any inclination towards doing karma yoga, that is, you'd like to dedicate some of the fruit of your work to Krishna, even if you start with a little bit, you can give to the temple in whatever, to whatever project you'd like to support. Or you can actually come here and do seva, service for the temple. Or you can actually, if you really want some excitement in life, you can accompany one of the sorties that goes out into the great unknown here in the Bay Area to distribute Krishna consciousness through chanting Hare Krishna in people's homes. We have that program. We also have programs on the universities and also going door to door. We set up tables on the street corners and things like that. And you'll be surprised the kinds of people you'll meet and how eager they are to take to Krishna consciousness. And you'll learn a lot about how to stay equal in practicing some of these things. So all of these things are facilities offered here at ISKCON of Silicon Valley. And if anybody's interested in taking up some service or increasing the service they have now, considering the fact that we have no idea when we're going to leave this world, and you might as well leave it all on the field before you go, right? You know that saying? For athletes, they're playing in a match, they say leave it all on the field. Don't leave it on the bench. So we have opportunities, so just be inquisitive and say, like, how can I get more involved? And we'll definitely give you a job to do here in Krishna Consciousness, because here at ISKCON Silicon Valley, we have jobs for everybody. And we guarantee a robust economy through the Sankirtan movement, because it's backed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So now, Now we get to continue the chanting, but we're going to add an extra feature to it, and that is dancing. So if you've never danced for Krishna, I highly recommend that this is the day you break free from whatever kind of hesitation you have. And there's different devotees here. They've perfected the art of dancing. You can watch them and follow what they do, or you can do your own kind of dance. But just feel free to clap or dance before the deities. So we're going to move this big, huge, beautiful rug out of the way. We're going to take all these little asanas and we're going to pile them in the back here. And we're going to clear this beautiful wooden dance floor, some trees sacrificed so that we could dance here before the Lord. So please take advantage of this unusual surface that we have. And thank you very, very much for coming here to ISKCON of Silicon Valley, and thanks for joining us online from various parts of the world. Gaur Premanande Haribo. Hare Krishna.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.